In the bustling heart of a medieval village, where the scent of freshly baked bread mingled with the less than pleasant aroma wafting from the communal garderobe, life thrived amidst an odd blend of charm and chaos. Picture this. A sunny afternoon, the air thick with gossip and the occasional yelp of a goat. Enter Sir Cedric, a nobleman with a penchant for pomp and circumstance, strutting through the marketplace, oblivious to the urgent grumbling of his stomach. Little did he know, lurking in the shadows was a clumsy squire named Oliver, whose clumsiness could rival that of a one-legged goose on ice. As Sir Cedric flaunted his latest feathered hat, a ridiculous explosion of colors that drew both admiration and laughter, he felt a sudden, insistent pang from his belly. Meanwhile, Oliver, juggling a chamber pot in one hand and a loaf of bread in the other, stumbled into the village's only public toilet, a rickety structure perched precariously over a stream. With the grace of a drunken stork, Oliver lost his grip, sending the pot flying and splattering not just the muddy ground but also a startled monk named Brother Benedict, who had been quietly pondering the mysteries of life, and trying to ignore his own digestive dilemma. "By the beard of Saint Benedict!" the monk exclaimed, frantically trying to wipe off the remnants of Oliver's mishap. As the villagers erupted in laughter, Sir Cedric, caught in an unfortunate moment of distraction, stepped into the splattered zone, his fine boots utterly ruined. Amidst the chaos, the garderobe, essentially a wooden seat with a hole that plummeted into the stream below, was the only sanctuary for the villagers, where privacy was a mere fantasy. A curtain, sometimes so tattered it barely qualified as a veil, separated the noble from the commoners, but not before the echoes of various unmentionable sounds filled the air, creating a symphony of embarrassment and humor. In this peculiar dance of medieval sanitation, one couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of it all. Here, amid the filth and folly, the villagers found camaraderie, laughter, and the strange understanding that even the noblest of souls had to contend with the very human need to let go, often in the most unceremonious ways. And so, life continued, one chamber pot at a time, in a world where the line between dignity and disaster was thinner than the air in the garderobe, setting the stage for medieval sanitation. In the bustling heart of medieval towns, where the air was thick with the scent of fresh bread, roasting meats, and, let's face it, an unmistakable aroma of something far less appetizing, the topic of sanitation was as delicate as the finest lace. Imagine a time when the concept of personal hygiene was not just underdeveloped but practically non-existent by today's standards. Instead of porcelain thrones, the urban poor relied on an assortment of makeshift toilets that could only be described as creative. If creativity is defined by a lack of options and an abundance of desperation. Toilets in this era were not the serene sanctuaries we envision today. They were often cloaked in mystery and mischief, where the only privacy one could expect was a flimsy curtain made of tattered cloth. Enter the garderobe, a charming little contraption that was essentially a hole in the floor, cleverly built over a moat or a cesspit. For the urban poor, using a garderobe was akin to playing a game of chance. One might just find themselves staring into a dark abyss, wondering if today would be the day they'd lose a shoe to the depths below. Now, let's take a peek into the life of our protagonist, a hapless squire named Cedric, who found himself entangled in the rather sticky situation of medieval sanitation. Clumsy and a bit too curious for his own good, Cedric was notorious for stumbling into trouble, especially when it came to matters of the toilet. One fateful day, while on a mission to fetch chamber pots for his lord's lavish feast, Cedric overheard a conversation between Lady Isolde, a nosy noblewoman, and Brother Alaric, a monk with frequent digestive issues that could rival a thunderstorm. "You must try the new herbal remedy, dear lady," Alaric exclaimed, holding his stomach with a pained expression. "It's said to cleanse one's insides thoroughly. But perhaps don't use it before a feast." Cedric, Ever the eavesdropper, misinterpreted the monk's advice and decided that the herbal remedy was a cure-all for his own embarrassing predicament. He had been summoned to the garderobe by a pressing nature call that seemed to come with a sense of urgency. With the chamber pot in hand, he hurried towards the nearest garderobe, only to find it occupied by none other than Lady Isolde herself, her delicate frame obscured by a rather elaborate dress. "Beg pardon, milady. Cedric stammered, awkwardly backing away, only to trip over his own feet and send the chamber pot flying. In a glorious arc, it sailed through the air, splattering its contents directly onto the unsuspecting Lady Isolde. A moment of stunned silence ensued, followed by the sound of a very loud gasp. "Cedric!" She shrieked, her face turning a shade of crimson that would make ripe cherries envious. "You buffoon! Do you realize what you've done?" "But milady, I thought you were in peril." "I was merely—" "Peril? Peril?" she exclaimed, waving her arms as if trying to ward off the embarrassment that clung to her like a second skin. "This is quite the perilous situation indeed." As Cedric scrambled to apologize, Brother Alaric waddled by, his own troubles evident as he reassured the flustered noblewoman. "Fear not, milady. A good splash of water and a prayer should suffice. Though if it were me, I'd rather be in the woods than here." The chaos continued as townsfolk gathered, drawn by the commotion. They found themselves laughing at the scene. A noblewoman drenched in waste, a clumsy squire fumbling for words, and a monk who seemed to find the entire debacle amusing. Meanwhile, down the street, a group of children played a game of chamber pot toss, blissfully unaware of the true horror of their sanitation system. In the end, Cedric learned a valuable lesson that day. While medieval toilets may have lacked sophistication, they certainly provided ample opportunities for humor and misadventure. And as the sun set over the town, the laughter echoed through the streets, reminding everyone that even in the most unsanitary of situations, a little levity goes a long way. In the quaint village of Tumbleton, where the cobblestones seemed to sing under the weight of history, the art of sanitation was a delicate dance, or rather, a chaotic jig. Sir Cedric, our bumbling knight with a penchant for misadventure, found himself in yet another predicament. The day began innocently enough, as he attempted to impress Lady Isolde with tales of gallant exploits. Yet, fate had other plans. As Cedric proudly regaled the lady with his latest victory over a particularly stubborn chamber pot, a nearby commotion caught his attention. The village's notorious nosy noble, Lady Agatha, was peering through the window of the garderobe, eager to witness the latest scandal. Unbeknownst to Cedric, the pot he had just triumphantly discarded was teetering precariously on the edge of a makeshift table. A table that had seen better days. In a moment of sheer clumsiness, Cedric lunged forward, only to send the pot flying through the air, splattering its contents spectacularly across Lady Isolde's finest gown. The noblewoman gasped, her face a portrait of disbelief, while Lady Agatha erupted into laughter, declaring it the best entertainment she had witnessed all year. Meanwhile, Brother Alaric, the local monk known for his chronic digestive issues, stumbled into the scene, unceremoniously clutching his own makeshift remedy, a concoction of herbs that smelled more like a witch's brew than a cure. As he inhaled deeply, his stomach grumbled ominously, and the villagers watched in horror and amusement, as the monk dashed for the garderobe, only to trip over Cedric's discarded pot, sending him and the contents of his herb pouch spiraling into the air. In that moment, Tumbleton was united not in horror, but in raucous laughter, the kind that echoed through the alleys and warmed the hearts of all. Amidst the chaos of medieval sanitation, Sir Cedric's mishaps, Lady Isolde's indignant splendor, and Brother Alaric's unfortunate timing reminded everyone that even in the most absurd circumstances, humor and camaraderie were the best remedies for life's many discomforts. After all, if one must endure the quirks of a medieval toilet, one might as well do so with a hearty laugh. A royal throne with a view. In the bustling heart of medieval towns, where the air was thick with the scent of fresh bread, roasting meats, and, let's face it, an unmistakable aroma of something far less appetizing, the topic of sanitation was not exactly a favorite subject of dinner conversations. But for the urban poor, the quest for relief was an everyday adventure, often marked by a healthy dose of humor and misadventure. Meet Oswald, an aspiring squire with aspirations that far exceeded his ability to navigate the treacherous waters of medieval hygiene. With his family living in a cramped, dilapidated dwelling, the concept of a garderobe, the royal throne with a view, a grand chamber pot perched over a moat or a ditch, was a distant fantasy. Instead, Oswald had his trusty chamber pot, affectionately dubbed Sir Pot, which he kept under his bed. It was a noble name for such a wretched vessel, but Oswald believed it deserved some dignity. One fateful morning, after a hearty breakfast of porridge and questionable sausages, Oswald felt the familiar rumble in his stomach. "Sir Pot," he declared, "it's time for you to earn your keep." With an exaggerated flourish, he tiptoed over to the pot, trying to avoid the creaky floorboards that had a penchant for announcing his every move. Just as he was about to relieve himself, a loud commotion erupted from outside. "Oswald! You dolt! Where are you?" shouted Aldred, his overly curious neighbor, who seemed to have an uncanny knack for appearing at the most inconvenient moments. "I found something marvelous. Come quick." With his trousers around his ankles and an urgent need for privacy, Oswald hesitated. "I'll be right there," he shouted back, hoping to finish his business before Aldred's curiosity got the better of him. But alas, the gods of timing were not on his side. Just as he reached for his trousers, the door swung open, revealing Aldred with a wild look in his eyes. "Look what I found." "A noble's discarded chamber pot," he exclaimed, holding up the pot triumphantly. "It's practically a treasure." Oswald's eyes widened in horror. "That's not treasure, Aldred. It's filth." He quickly pulled his trousers up, but not before stepping awkwardly on the floorboard, which let out a loud squeak, echoing like a trumpet in the small room. But Aldred was undeterred. But think of the stories it holds. What secrets must it contain? At that moment, Brother Reginald, the local monk known for his digestive issues, waddled in, clearly in distress. "Oswald! I need your chamber pot, immediately." "Not Sir Pot," Oswald gasped, clutching the pot protectively. "You can't have him. He's a noble vessel." Brother Reginald crossed his arms, his face turning a shade of crimson. "I assure you, I have no time for pleasantries. If you do not relinquish that pot, I fear I will soil the floor." With a resigned sigh, Oswald handed over Sir Pot, who was now destined to bear the weight of Reginald's urgent plight. In the chaos, Aldred, still fascinated by the noble's chamber pot, accidentally knocked it over, spilling its contents onto the floor. The smell was immediate, an olfactory assault that sent everyone scrambling for fresh air. "By the saints!" Brother Reginald exclaimed, his face contorted in equal parts horror and amusement. "This is why we have garderobes. And yet here we are, in the midst of a royal disaster." As they all fled the room, Oswald couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of it all. Here they were, three men of varying status and dignity, united by one simple truth. Medieval sanitation was a fool's errand. In the end, Oswald and his companions found themselves outside, breathing in the fresh air and sharing a laugh over their misadventures. Sure, they might not have had the luxury of a garderobe, but they certainly had a tale worth telling, a reminder that sometimes, the best way to deal with the stench of life was to share a laugh and embrace the chaos. And so, in the grand tradition of medieval townsfolk, they raised a toast to Sir Pot, the unsung hero of their lives, who had seen more than any of them would care to admit. After all, in a world where cleanliness was often a luxury, a good sense of humor was the best sanitation of all. In the bustling heart of a medieval village, where the air was thick with the aroma of roasted meats and the chatter of villagers, Sir Cedric the Clumsy found himself on yet another misadventure. It was a bright morning, and the sun streamed through the narrow windows of the keep, illuminating the chaos within. Today, Cedric was determined to impress the lovely Lady Isolde, who had a penchant for tales of bravery. Though little did she know, his greatest battles were fought in the realm of sanitation. As the day unfolded, Cedric's quest for romance led him to the dreaded Garderobe, a wooden structure resembling a throne but with a decidedly less regal purpose. Cedric, ever the nobleman with a flair for the dramatic, decided to show off his bravery by using the toilet while narrating a grand tale of his supposed exploits. However, the Garderobe was notorious not only for its lack of privacy but also for the precarious positioning of the chamber pots below. Just as he reached the climax of his story, a loud crash echoed through the chamber. Brother Alaric, the well-meaning but perpetually clumsy monk, had tripped over his own robe, sending a chamber pot tumbling. With a splatter that would make even the hardiest of knights wince, the contents splashed onto Lady Isolde's pristine gown. The noble lady was left speechless, her expression a blend of shock and disbelief. Meanwhile, Lady Agatha, watching the scene unfold, erupted into laughter, her cackles echoing off the stone walls. "Cedric, dear, if you wanted to impress her, I believe you've missed the mark," she chortled, tears of mirth spilling from her eyes. In the midst of this chaos, the squire, Cedric's loyal but bumbling companion, had mistakenly grabbed a ladle instead of a towel, attempting to assist Lady Isolde while inadvertently flinging scraps of food everywhere. The other nobles, drawn by the commotion, gathered around, each with their own opinions and unsolicited advice on how to handle the fine art of medieval toilet usage. As the laughter rang out, Cedric realized that though life in the Middle Ages was indeed fraught with challenges, from the ever-present smell of waste to the lack of privacy, the joy found in shared laughter and camaraderie was the true treasure of his time. With a sheepish grin and a bow, he offered his apologies to Lady Isolde, who, despite her predicament, found herself chuckling at the surreal turn of events. And so, amid the echoes of laughter and the scent of chaos, the villagers learned that even in the most trying of circumstances, a good sense of humor could transform the most embarrassing moments into stories that would be told for generations to come. Thus, the tale of Sir Cedric and the great Garderobe mishap became a cherished anecdote, reminding all that life, much like a medieval toilet, was anything but glamorous, but oh, how delightfully entertaining it could be. The unsung heroes of indoor plumbing. In the bustling heart of medieval towns, where the air was thick with the scent of fresh bread, roasting meats, and, let's face it, an unmistakable aroma of something far less appetizing, the topic of sanitation was far from a royal concern. Instead, it was an unsung hero of daily life, embodied in the humble chamber pot. It was a time when privacy was a luxury few could afford, and the concept of indoor plumbing was as foreign as a dragon's tea party. Meet Cedric, a clumsy squire who was more adept at tripping over his own feet than wielding a sword. One fateful morning, Cedric was tasked with fetching an exquisite chamber pot for Lady Eleanor, a noblewoman whose sense of decorum was rivaled only by her insatiable appetite for gossip. The pot was supposedly encrusted with jewels, though Cedric suspected it was more about the sparkle of the lady's reputation than the porcelain itself. As he clambered through the busy marketplace, Cedric's thoughts wandered to the complexities of medieval sanitation. The noble had their garderobes, essentially, fancy holes in the wall that provided a view of the courtyard and a swift exit for waste. How delightful, thought Cedric, to be able to pop a squat while simultaneously surveying one's subjects. But for the urban poor like himself, the chamber pot was the crown jewel of the latrine world. It was both a throne and a time bomb, often teetering on the edge of disaster. After a while, Cedric finally reached Lady Eleanor's castle, where he was met by the ever-curious noblewoman. "Ah, Cedric. Have you brought me my precious chamber pot?" she inquired, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. Yes, my lady," he stammered, holding the pot aloft like a trophy. But before he could present it, a loud commotion erupted from the garderobe above. To Cedric's horror, a nobleman, Sir Reginald, known for his rather dubious dietary choices, had just unleashed a cacophony that sent a chorus of gasps through the hall. The unfortunate result of his earlier feast of 3-day-old mutton and questionable cheese created a mess that would make even the bravest knight's stomach churn. As Cedric stood frozen, contemplating whether to flee or clean, Lady Eleanor, with a nose for scandal, dashed towards the scene. "Oh, the drama! I must see this," she squealed, leaving poor Cedric to juggle the chamber pot and the fallout of Sir Reginald's misadventure. In his panic, Cedric miscalculated and slipped on a discarded fish head, launching the chamber pot into the air. Time slowed as it sailed through the room like a herald of doom, splattering its contents in a glorious arc across the hall. Gasps turned to uproarious laughter, and Cedric's face burned with embarrassment as he realized the chamber pot had become the centerpiece of an impromptu festival of folly. Meanwhile, Brother Alistair, a monk with a notoriously sensitive stomach, entered just in time to witness the chaos. "Sweet saints! Is this a feast or a farce?" he exclaimed, clutching his belly as he dashed for the nearest garderobe, only to find it occupied by Sir Reginald, who was still recovering from his earlier escapade. With a flair for the dramatic, Alistair leaned against the door, proclaiming, "Forgive me, Lord, for I have sinned. The only thing worse than my dinner is the lack of a proper privy." The hilarity of the moment was not lost on the onlookers, who erupted into fits of laughter, their previous concerns about hygiene momentarily forgotten. Through it all, Cedric learned a valuable lesson. While the chamber pot may not have been a throne fit for a king, it was certainly the star of the show. As the laughter echoed through the castle, he realized that in the grand scheme of medieval life, even the most mundane tasks could become an adventure, a comedy of errors that united both noble and commoner in the shared experience of humanity, albeit with a rather unpleasant odor lingering in the air. In the bustling village of Tumbleton, where the air was thick with the aroma of baked bread and, unfortunately, less savory scents, the art of sanitation was a daily struggle. Sir Cedric, resplendent in his feathered hat, prided himself on his noble lineage but was entirely unprepared for the calamity that awaited him in the garderobe. With a flourish, he proclaimed his intent to relieve himself in style. Little did he know, the wooden seat was far less forgiving than his polished armor. Meanwhile, Oliver, the clumsy squire, was frantically searching for a chamber pot, only to trip over Brother Alaric's robes. The monk, perpetually troubled by his own digestive demons, had just claimed the garderobe as his sanctuary. A cacophony of sounds erupted as Oliver crashed into the very contraption meant for his needs, sending the pot, and its contents, flying across the room, landing squarely on the unsuspecting Sir Cedric. The nobleman's protest was muffled by a gurgle of laughter from the villagers outside, who had gathered to witness the spectacle. As the commotion unfolded, the locals shared tales of past mishaps, from errant goats munching on discarded waste to the time the baker's wife mistook a chamber pot for a bread basket. It was a raucous reminder that in the heart of medieval life, where privacy was a luxury and hygiene a challenge, laughter was the true remedy. In Tumbleton, even the most mortifying moments were suffused with a spirit of camaraderie, proving that amidst the chaos of their toilet trials, joy could always find a way to seep through the cracks. The art of tossing it all away. Waste disposal. The art of tossing it all away. In the bustling heart of a medieval town, where the air was a curious blend of bread baking, meat sizzling, and, let's be honest, scents that could knock a troll off its feet, the topic of waste disposal was not one that many chose to discuss over their morning ale. However, for the urban poor, the reality of their sanitation situation was as unavoidable as the town crier's morning proclamations. Meet Gertrude, a sprightly woman with a penchant for gossip and a chamber pot that had seen better days. She lived in a cramped hovel just off the main thoroughfare, where the aroma of fresh pastries often clashed with something altogether less appetizing. Gertrude had a unique relationship with her chamber pot, considering it both a necessary evil and her most trusted confidant. Each morning, Gertrude would empty her pot into the gutter with a flourish, often yelling, "Clear the way," as she tossed the contents like a juggler at a fair. Unfortunately, her aim was as questionable as that of a blindfolded jester. One fateful morning, as she hurled the pot with a dramatic swing, it landed squarely on the head of Sir Reginald, the local nobleman, who was just passing by. "Oi! Gertrude, you've got a bit of a mess on your hands," he bellowed, wiping the contents from his face, his expression a mix of disbelief and disgust. "Better me than you, Sir Reginald." "At least I know where to aim," she retorted, smirking as she ducked back inside her hovel, leaving the nobleman sputtering in indignation. But Gertrude wasn't alone in her quest for sanitation. Nearby, young Simon, a clumsy squire, was attempting to navigate his own waste disposal dilemma. With a chamber pot that was more of a decorative piece than a functional one, Simon had recently taken to using the garderobe, a fancy medieval term for a toilet that was little more than a hole in the floor, often located above a moat or cesspit. One day, in a fit of pride, Simon decided to show off his bravery to a group of giggling maidens. "Watch me. I shall use the garderobe like a true knight," he declared, puffing out his chest. As he climbed the rickety ladder to the upper chamber, he misjudged his footing and, with a loud crash, tumbled into the very cesspit he was trying to avoid. The maidens shrieked, half in horror, half in laughter. Simon emerged, dripping and defeated, his dreams of valiance and charm washed away along with the muck of the moat. "I'd suggest a bath, but I think I need a miracle," he cried, splashing back to the streets, a living testament to the perils of medieval plumbing. Meanwhile, Brother Benedict, a monk known for his pious demeanor and unfortunate digestive issues, was about to embark on his own bathroom adventure. With a solemnity befitting a man of the cloth, he made his way to the communal latrine, a place of both desperation and camaraderie. As he settled himself upon the cold wooden seat, he was blissfully unaware of the two townsfolk arguing just outside. "It's not a goat. It's clearly a sheep," one yelled, while the other insisted otherwise, their voices rising in a cacophony that echoed through the chamber. Suddenly, a loud thud resonated from the latrine as Brother Benedict, startled by the commotion, lost his balance and found himself tumbling down the hole, only to land in the very cesspit Simon had just vacated. "Oh, for the love of Saint Benedict!" he wailed, lamenting both his fate and the lack of proper plumbing. In the end, the medieval methods of waste disposal were as much a part of daily life as the bread on the table, fostering tales of clumsiness and chaos that would be retold in taverns for years to come. For the urban poor, the art of tossing it all away was not just a matter of hygiene. It was a source of laughter, mischief, and perhaps a little bit of grace in a world where the smell was often worse than the story. In the bustling village of Tumbleton, where the scent of freshly baked bread often mingled with less savory aromas, the plight of the urban poor was a daily affair. Little did they know, the real comedy lay not in their meager means but in their daily encounters with the infamous garderobe. Sir Cedric, a well-meaning but clumsy squire, had long harbored a crush on the enchanting Lady Isolde. One fateful day, he decided to impress her with tales of valor, only to find himself in a most unfortunate predicament. As he animatedly recounted his supposed dragon-slaying adventures, he inadvertently jostled a chamber pot, a vessel more commonly used for its less dignified purpose, smack into the delicate hem of Isolde's gown. The moment hung in the air, thick with the promise of awkwardness, before erupting into raucous laughter from the gathered villagers. Meanwhile, Brother Alaric, the village monk whose own digestive issues were the stuff of legend, had just entered the scene, only to be met with the aftermath of Cedric's blunder. His sallow complexion turned a shade of crimson as he attempted to navigate the sea of giggles and snickers. "Mayhaps I should bless the chamber pot," he muttered, "for it seems more popular than I on this fine day." As the villagers came together to share in the hilarity, the realities of their sanitation woes became secondary to the joy found in camaraderie. The clattering of pots, the laughter of children, and the absurdity of their situation painted a vivid picture of life in Tumbleton. They might not have had the luxury of privacy, but they had each other, and a healthy dose of humor, to lighten the load of their medieval existence. In this quaint corner of the world, where the struggles of hygiene met the hilarity of human folly, laughter proved to be the finest remedy for their daily trials. And as the sun set over Tumbleton, the villagers raised their mugs, toasting not just to survival but to the gift of laughter that united them all. A social gathering or a stinky affair. In the bustling heart of a medieval town, where the air was a curious blend of bread baking, meat sizzling, and, let's be honest, scents that could make a goat faint, the concept of sanitation was as vague as the notion of personal space. For the urban poor, real toilets were a luxury rarely afforded. Instead, they relied on the trusty chamber pot, a ceramic companion that had seen better days and smelled worse. One particularly gloomy Wednesday, as rain drizzled upon the cobblestones, a scrawny lad named Oswald found himself on a quest. Not for glory or riches, but for the safe disposal of his chamber pot's contents. As he cautiously navigated the narrow lane behind the tavern, he was oblivious to the nobleman, Sir Reginald, who was leaning against the wall, attempting to look dignified while adjusting his ruffled collar. "Ah, Oswald. My good man," Sir Reginald called out, with the sort of enthusiasm typically reserved for a royal decree. "What brings you to this wretched corner of filth on such a dreary day?" Oswald, clutching his pot like a knight would hold his sword, replied, "Sir, I am merely performing the essential duty of waste disposal." "Ah, waste disposal," Reginald exclaimed, feigning a gasp. "How pedestrian. Surely you could find a more refined means of passing the time?" With a roll of his eyes, Oswald continued his mission, dodging a particularly large puddle that had gathered ominously near the edge of the cobblestone street. However, just as he was about to dispose of his burden, a clumsy squire named Cedric, who had been practicing his swordplay nearby, stumbled into his path. "Look out, Oswald!" Cedric shouted, swinging his wooden sword with all the grace of a drunkard on stilts. The lad barely had time to react before the chamber pot went flying, its contents soaring through the air like a foul comet. "By the beard of Saint Benedict!" Reginald cried, as he ducked just in time to avoid the smelly projectiles. It splattered against the wall behind him, leaving a mark that would surely be the talk of the town for weeks to come. "That's one way to make a splash," Oswald muttered, trying to stifle a laugh. He quickly turned to Cedric, whose face was now a portrait of horror. "You've made a right mess of things." Meanwhile, Brother Alaric, a monk renowned for his piety and notorious for his digestive issues, emerged from the nearby garderobe, a fancy term for a medieval toilet that resembled a small closet with a hole in the floor. The scent wafting from the structure was enough to send even the hardiest townsfolk reeling. "Have no fear, my son," Alaric declared, attempting to maintain his dignity despite the odor. "I have just prayed for a miracle regarding my bowels, and it seems the good Lord has decided to answer, with a vengeance." The squire, now thoroughly embarrassed, blurted out, "Perhaps next time, brother, you should avoid the spicy lentils." As they all stood amidst the chaos of overturned pots and unfortunate splatters, the nobleman finally broke into laughter. "You see, my friends, this is what happens when we neglect the art of sanitation. A simple chamber pot can turn into a weapon of mass embarrassment." "Perhaps we should take this incident as a lesson," Oswald said, wiping his brow. "In the future, I shall invest in a lid for my pot. And maybe a catapult for greater distance." The group erupted in laughter, their previous embarrassment replaced by camaraderie. And so, in a medieval world where hygiene practices left much to be desired, the experience of using a toilet became less about the act itself and more about the stories that arose from it. As long as the townsfolk could find humor amid the stench, they knew they could face another day in their lively, if not overly fragrant, existence. Thus, the tale of the flying chamber pot became a local legend, reminding everyone that while medieval sanitation may have been lacking, the laughter it inspired was anything but. In the bustling village of Tumbleton, where the stench of the medieval toilet system was rivaled only by the gossip of its residents, an amusing calamity was about to unfold. Sir Cedric, the well-meaning but clumsy knight, had his heart set on impressing the lovely Lady Isolda. Little did he know, his grand gesture would backfire spectacularly. As he prepared to regale Isolda with tales of valor near the village's infamous Garderobe, a rudimentary contraption that served as both a toilet and a lookout point, his eye caught a glimpse of the lady's exquisite gown. With the gallantry of a knight and the grace of a drunken goose, Cedric attempted to balance a chamber pot on his head, hoping to demonstrate his prowess in multitasking. Alas, the pot wobbled precariously, and in a twist of fate, it toppled, spilling its contents directly onto Isolda's pristine dress. Meanwhile, Brother Alaric, the village monk suffering from excessive flatulence due to his love for beans, was making his own pilgrimage to the Garderobe. In his haste, he tripped over Cedric's discarded pot and landed headfirst into the very pit he was trying to avoid. The sight of the good brother flailing, arms akimbo, while shouting, "By the saints, I found the bottom of the world," was enough to send the villagers into fits of laughter. As laughter echoed through Tumbleton, it became clear that despite the unsavory realities of medieval sanitation, the camaraderie among its quirky characters was what truly held the community together. In the end, Cedric learned that while knights may wield swords, it is laughter that conquers all, even in the most embarrassing of situations. Meet the nosy noble and the clumsy squire. In the bustling heart of a medieval town, where the air was a curious blend of bread baking, meat sizzling, and, let's be honest, scents that could make a goat faint, the concept of sanitation was as refined as a pig in a tuxedo. Enter our characters. Lord Reginald, the nosy noble, and his hapless companion, Squire Barnaby, whose clumsiness was only rivaled by his knack for landing in the most unfortunate situations. On a particularly warm afternoon, with the sun blazing down and the townsfolk going about their business, Lord Reginald decided it was the perfect day to inspect his estate, particularly the garderobe, the medieval equivalent of a toilet, albeit one that lacked the privacy and comfort we modern souls take for granted. The garderobe was essentially a small room with a hole overhanging the castle walls, where waste would conveniently drop into the moat below. Lord Reginald, keen on ensuring that his castle was the finest in the land, felt it his duty to inspect this vital piece of infrastructure. "Barnaby," he bellowed, the sound echoing off the stone walls, "fetch me the chamber pot. I must demonstrate the proper usage of our facilities to the new tenants." Barnaby, a squire who had yet to master the finer arts of balance and dexterity, scrambled to comply. He tripped over a stray hound, sending him tumbling towards the garderobe. In a comical twist of fate, the chamber pot flew from his hands, landing perfectly, or imperfectly, depending on your perspective, on the head of old man Jeb, who was innocently passing by below. By the heavens! What in the name of all that is holy? Old man Jeb roared, desperately trying to shake off the contents of the pot, which, in true medieval fashion, had not been emptied for a good long while. The townsfolk paused, laughter bubbling up like the town's famous stew. "Barnaby!" Reginald shouted, not even bothering to hide his amusement. "You've truly outdone yourself." That's one way to introduce oneself to the neighbors. Barnaby, blushing a shade of crimson that would make a ripe tomato jealous, stumbled backward, nearly knocking over a stack of hay bales. "My lord, I was merely trying to." "Trying to what?" Impress the townsfolk with your impeccable aim? Reginald chuckled, wiping tears of laughter from his eyes. A pity your jest was not aimed at the garderobe. With the townsfolk now in uproar, Barnaby decided it was time to redeem himself. I shall demonstrate how the chamber pot is used properly, my lord, he declared, puffing out his chest in a misguided attempt at bravado. He hurried back to the garderobe, determined to show the townsfolk that a squire could be both noble and skilled. Meanwhile, Brother Malachi, the local monk, ambled into the scene, his face contorted in discomfort. Good sirs, pray, could I have a moment? The beans from last night's feast are wreaking havoc upon my insides. Reginald, ever the opportunist, seized the moment. Fear not, brother. You may use our esteemed garderobe, and I shall instruct the townsfolk on its proper usage. Barnaby, in his fervor to impress, had already positioned himself atop the garderobe, only to realize that the drop was far more daunting than anticipated. With a loud yelp, he lost his footing, tumbling down, thankfully, into the moat. The splash sent ripples that startled the local ducks, who quacked in indignation. Excellent technique, Barnaby. Reginald hooted, doubling over in laughter. Perhaps the moat could use a little cleaning, but you've truly brought new meaning to the term, waste disposal. As the townsfolk roared with laughter, Barnaby emerged, dripping and sputtering, yet somehow maintaining his dignity. I was merely testing the waters, my lord, he quipped, attempting to salvage the situation. The scene went from hilarious to absurd as Brother Malachi finally made his way to the garderobe, only to find Barnaby still clinging to the edge, trying to avoid an even worse fate. In the chaotic heart of the medieval town, as laughter echoed and the sense of the day mingled with the unfortunate realities of life, it became clear. The art of sanitation was not just a matter of necessity but a source of endless amusement. And as for Lord Reginald, he learned that sometimes the best way to bond with your subjects is through shared laughter, even if it comes at the expense of a poor, clumsy squire and a very unfortunate chamber pot. In the quaint village of Tumbleton, where the air was thick with the scent of hay and, occasionally, something far less pleasant, the notion of privacy was as foreign as a dragon in a chicken coop. The noble Sir Cedric, renowned for his gallant heart yet notoriously clumsy disposition, found himself in quite the predicament one fateful afternoon. Determined to impress the lovely Lady Isolda, he had resolved to join her for a stroll. But nature had other plans. As the sun shone brightly, Sir Cedric's stomach churned ominously, a sensation reminiscent of the time he'd mistaken a chamber pot for a fine wine vessel. In a noble rush, he attempted to navigate the winding path to the village's Garderobe, a rickety structure that looked more like a birdhouse than a lavatory. With walls that offered no more privacy than a sheer curtain, it was a place where secrets went to die, often amidst a chorus of giggles from the nearby villagers. Meanwhile, Brother Alaric, the ever-curious monk with a penchant for overindulgence in lentil stew, was engaged in his own battle of wills. His digestive woes had led him to the same unfortunate destination, where he too was determined to find solace. As Cedric pushed open the creaky door, he was greeted by the sight of Alaric in mid-squat, a position that sent the poor knight stumbling backward into a pile of hay. "By the grace of Saint Benedict," Alaric cried, scrambling to cover his modesty with a rather unfortunate assortment of straw. Cedric, still reeling from the shock, slipped on the hay and tumbled forward, inadvertently sending a nearby chamber pot flying into the air. Time seemed to slow as the pot spun majestically, eventually landing with a splat on Lady Isolda, who had just arrived to witness the spectacle. In that moment of chaos, laughter erupted from the villagers, echoing through the fields of Tumbleton. Sir Cedric, now a mix of embarrassment and determination, approached Isolda. "My lady, I assure you, this is not how I envisioned our outing." Isolda, wiping stray remnants from her gown with a bemused smile, replied, "Well, Sir Cedric, at least your aim is better than your etiquette." As the two shared a hearty laugh, surrounded by the antics of a nosy noblewoman peering into the garderobe and the clumsy squire attempting to salvage the situation, it became clear that in the realm of medieval sanitation, laughter was perhaps the finest remedy of all. In Tumbleton, where the toilets were crude and the humor was rich, the bonds of friendship flourished even amidst the most unexpected of circumstances. Amongst misadventures in hygiene. Digestive dilemmas. Amongst misadventures in hygiene. In the quaint town of Widdershins, where the cobblestone streets twisted like a drunken snake, the concept of sanitation was, shall we say, a tad on the loose side. Much like the trousers of brother Alaric. A monk of some renown. Mostly for his inability to resist a good feast, Alaric had a penchant for creamy cheeses and robust ales that would soon challenge the limits of any medieval toilet. The town's garderobe, a fancy term for a rather unrefined privy, was a wooden structure perched precariously over the castle moat. It had all the charm of a hastily constructed birdhouse made by a blind carpenter. As Alaric approached, he couldn't help but notice the unmistakable odor wafting from the hole, a mixture of desperation and despair that could only belong to the urban poor. They had no choice but to make do with whatever they could find: chamber pots, bushes, or, if particularly bold, an alleyway where the sunlight never shone. "Ah, brother Alaric," came the voice of Lord Percival, a nosy noble with a penchant for gossip and an unsettling interest in the monk's dietary habits. "I see you're heading to the facilities. Might I inquire about your health? You seem a tad green." "Green?" Alaric replied, clutching his stomach. "I assure you, my lord, it's just the cheese. Well, mostly." With Lord Percival's curious eyes watching him like a hawk, Alaric hurriedly entered the garderobe, praying that the wooden door would hold against the onslaught of his digestive turmoil. Inside, the light was dim, and the only company was a few startled rats who seemed to have made this place their home. They scurried away as he settled onto the seat. A hole in the board that felt more like a trapdoor to the underworld. Just as he began to ponder the philosophical implications of his current predicament, a loud crash echoed from outside. It was Harold, the clumsy squire, who had tripped over his own feet while attempting to impress the ladies. "Fear not, fair maidens. I shall save you," he had shouted, only to become an unintentional jester in the process. Alaric, caught in a moment of vulnerability, let out a guttural groan that seemed to echo off the stone walls. The noise startled a pigeon perched on a nearby beam, sending it flapping out of the garderobe and straight into Lord Percival's face. "By the saints!" the noble cried, flailing about as the bird squawked in indignation. "Truly, my lord, I think the bird is more frightened than you." Alaric called out, trying to contain his laughter despite the precarious situation. "What kind of foul magic is this?" Lord Percival gasped, wiping pigeon feathers from his hair. "You must be cursed." "Cursed, perhaps, by my choices at the feast," Alaric mused, his mind racing back to the cheese wheel that had beckoned him like a siren. "Or maybe just by the lack of proper sanitation in this town. I dare say, the urban poor have it far worse with their chamber pots and alleyways." Outside the garderobe, the townsfolk were starting to gather, intrigued by the commotion. No one was spared from the joys of medieval hygiene. Waste disposal often involved tossing refuse into the streets, with the occasional shout of, "Watch out!" ringing through the air. Alaric could only imagine the chaos that would ensue if he were to make a hasty exit from his wooden throne. With a final push that felt like a minor earthquake, Alaric emerged, wiping his brow. "Ah, my lord, I see you've met my feathered friend," he quipped, trying to mask his embarrassment with humor. "Indeed, and I shall have words with the castle's maintenance. This garderobe is a disgrace," Lord Percival declared, still picking feathers from his cloak. "Perhaps we should start a petition for proper toilets?" Alaric suggested, laughter bubbling beneath his breath. "Or at least a warning sign." Harold chimed in, finally regaining his footing and brushing dirt off his tunic. And so, amidst the laughter and the chaos, the three unlikely companions found common ground in the shared understanding that when it came to medieval sanitation, life was a bit of a mess, literally and figuratively. In the quaint village of Tumbleton, where the scent of wildflowers mingled with less than pleasant aromas, life unfolded with its fair share of peculiarities, particularly when it came to matters of sanitation. The villagers, a colorful cast of characters, navigated the challenges of their medieval toilets with a mix of humor and exasperation. Sir Cedric, the hapless squire, had a penchant for mischief but an even greater talent for stumbling into trouble. One fateful afternoon, enamored by the radiant Lady Isolde, he attempted to impress her by demonstrating his prowess in managing the cumbersome garderobe. Alas, in his eagerness, he knocked over a chamber pot, sending its contents splattering with an unsightly thud. Lady Isolde, ever the noblewoman, gasped, but instead of outrage, a fit of laughter erupted, echoing through the hall. Meanwhile, Brother Alaric, a kind-hearted monk with a notorious reputation for his digestive dilemmas, found himself in dire need of relief. As he waddled towards the garderobe, clutching his belly, he inadvertently collided with a curious nobleman peering in, desperate to witness the spectacle of medieval waste disposal. The nobleman yelped, and Alaric, startled, lost his balance, tumbling into the very garderobe he sought. The sight was so absurd that even the most stoic villagers couldn't help but guffaw. In Tumbleton, where privacy was a luxury few could afford, the villagers turned their toilet tribulations into a source of camaraderie, sharing stories and laughter. Amidst the chaos of chamber pots and overflowing garderobes, they found a universal truth. Sometimes, life's messiest moments are the ones that bind us together in the most delightful ways. Lessons from the lavatories of the past. In the chaotic tapestry of medieval life, where feasting often outweighed fasting and sanitation was a luxury few could afford, the urban poor navigated a world of makeshift lavatories that would make even the most intrepid modern-day plumber shudder. While the wealthy could boast of their lavish garderobes, those delightful little rooms that jutted out from castle walls like a medieval appendage, the common folk were left to their own devices, often resulting in a creative, if not entirely sanitary, approach to their bodily needs. What did they use instead of real toilets, you ask? Well, dear reader, prepare for a journey through the fragrant alleys of history where desperation and ingenuity reigned supreme. Picture, if you will, a bustling market square in the heart of a medieval town. Stalls overflow with ripe fruits and stinking fish, and the air is thick with the aroma of baking bread mingling with something far less palatable. Among the throngs is our hero, a clumsy squire named Percival. Percival had one noble aspiration: to impress Lady Beatrice, a noblewoman whose beauty was rivaled only by her disdain for all things related to bodily functions. Unfortunately for him, his digestive system had other plans. As Percival ambled through the market, he felt the unmistakable gurgle of impending doom in his belly. The morning's generous helping of lentil stew was staging a revolt, and Percival was in dire need of a place to relieve himself. Aha, he thought, spotting a nearby alley where the stench was particularly pungent. Little did he know, he was about to embark on a comedic misadventure. The alley was home to a chamber pot recycling system, an innovative arrangement where the urban poor would line up to dispose of their waste in a communal vat, which, legend had it, was also home to a particularly nasty rat named Roderick. With no time to lose, Percival dashed into the alley, flinging his dignity aside like last week's cabbage. As he approached the vat, he noticed a curious figure lurking behind a cart of cabbages. None other than Sir Reginald, the nosy nobleman with a penchant for gossip. What do we have here? A squire in dire straits? Sir Reginald called out, his voice oozing with mockery. Don't be shy, Percival. We all have our business to attend to. Flustered, Percival fumbled with his trousers, nearly toppling into the very vat he sought to conquer. "A little privacy, Sir Reginald?" he stammered, cheeks aflame. The nobleman merely chuckled. "In this town, privacy is but a luxury, my friend." With a great deal of embarrassment and a comical amount of shuffling, Percival finally managed to accomplish his task, but not before Roderick the rat made a daring leap for the squire's trousers, mistaking them for a new nest. The ensuing chaos left both Percival and Sir Reginald in fits of laughter, albeit for very different reasons. Meanwhile, not too far away, Brother Anselm, a monk perpetually troubled by his own digestive dilemmas, had heard the commotion. Having experienced his fair share of mishaps with the church's garderobe system, where the toilet paper was merely a handful of straw, he decided to investigate. Arriving at the scene, he witnessed Percival wrestling with Roderick and Sir Reginald doubled over in laughter. "Ah, the trials of man!" Brother Anselm proclaimed, shaking his head. "You see, dear squire, this is why one must always remember to check for vermin before embarking on a quest of this nature." As the three men exchanged stories, of chamber pots that overflowed, of neighbors who mistook the local river for a toilet, and of the infamous toilet wars between rival households, an unexpected camaraderie formed amidst the stench. They bonded over their shared plight, realizing that sanitation, while often a source of embarrassment, was also a unifying experience in their medieval world. And so, dear reader, as you sit comfortably upon your porcelain throne, remember the trials faced by those in the past. The medieval toilet experience was not merely a matter of convenience. It was a lesson in humility, community, and the hilariously unpredictable nature of human existence. In the grand tapestry of history, perhaps the greatest lesson from the lavatories of the past is this: sometimes, laughter is the best remedy for a dreadful situation, and a shared chuckle over a chamber pot can forge friendships that last well beyond the stench. In the quaint village of Tumbleton, where the aroma of freshly baked bread mingled with the unmistakable stench of uncollected refuse, life was an unpredictable jigsaw puzzle of hilarity and chaos. Sir Cedric, the most hapless of knights, found himself perpetually entangled in the mysteries of medieval sanitation. On a particularly eventful day, as he prepared for a grand feast at the castle, he accidentally mistook Lady Isolda's beautifully embroidered gown for a chamber pot cover. The resulting chaos was nothing short of legendary. Meanwhile, Brother Alaric, the village's resident monk, battled his own digestive demons, often finding himself in the most precarious of situations. His desperate sprint to the garderobe, an open-air toilet perched precariously over the village moat, was a sight to behold. Villagers would often whisper that it was less a means of relieving oneself and more an opportunity for some unintended acrobatics. As Cedric and Alaric navigated their daily struggles, Lady Agatha, a noblewoman with an insatiable appetite for gossip, reveled in the absurdity around her. She would eavesdrop on Cedric's blunders and Alaric's pitiful cries, turning their tribulations into tales of amusement for the evening gatherings. In Tumbleton, amid the lack of privacy and the ever-present risk of a chamber pot mishap, laughter became the village's most cherished remedy against the trials of their time. Despite the unsavory conditions, it was in these shared moments of folly that the true spirit of community flourished, proving that, indeed, laughter was the best sanitation of all.